Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. My name is Joanie Willett and I'm an associate professor in politics at the University of Exeter. Okay, so our webinar today, academia, while immensely rewarding, can be pretty a tough gig, particularly for junior researchers. So this professional development webinar today draws on years of experience across countries and institutions and different levels of seniority to highlight the practices that help individual academics to become more productive researchers. These practices make an institution's research culture more effective, productive, and inclusive, providing also considerable mutual and cumulative benefits. Okay, so our speaker today is Professor Don Webber from the Sheffield University Management School. Don is head of entrepreneurship, strategy, and international business, and is also the professor of managerial economics at Sheffield University Management School. He's published over 100 refereed journal articles and led or collaborated on 2.3 million worth of grant-funded research. So is a perfect person to be able to explore this topic with us today. So Don's current research challenges our understanding of regional growth and development, and it develops our understanding of the academic research ecosystem. On the latter, he's very interested to learn what enables you to be able to achieve your research potential. Okay, so very much looking forward to you talking with us in just a minute, Don. But first of all, before just slightly beforehand, a couple of housekeeping things. You will have noticed that the webinar is being recorded, but you'll be able to watch the recording on the Regional Studies Association website later on, and you'll be notified when that goes live. Don will be talking. So after Don's talk, Don will be taking questions in the last 10 minutes, and we strongly encourage you to participate. If you want to join in, please use the Q&A box. So that's the Q&A box to put in your questions, thoughts, and comments, and then we can collect them all together, and Don can respond to them at the end of the talk. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. And Don, over to you.
Thanks very much, Joanie. I'll just share some slides. Okay, can you see that? Yep. Okay, so my name is Professor Don Webber. I'm going to be talking through 30 years worth of reflections. Not only on my own career, but also when I have been discussing my colleagues' careers. And in doing so, I'm going to be emphasizing a number of things. I'm going to be emphasizing that in order to be a success in your career, you really need to be doing some obvious things, which unfortunately not everybody does. So you really need to be following something which you're genuinely interested in. I do know some individuals who don't necessarily do that and are not really achieving their potential. Some individuals are following extrinsic motivations, and I don't think they're making as much contribution as they should be. So do try to make a contribution, do try to make a difference, and also be highly flexible. I don't know whether you're like me, but I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning with an idea, you know, I need some post-it notes next to my bed and write down those ideas because they don't necessarily come back to me at 10 o'clock in the morning. All of these ideas are embedded in this book, How to Enhance Your Research, 100 Practical Tips for Academics. But what I'd like to do during this webinar is to focus on two main aspects instead, because I think these are the issues which really are the most important. Where you work really counts, and where you publish really counts. So I'm a professor of managerial economics. I could work in an economics department. I could work in a business school. where I work is incredibly important. In order to work in a business school, I often need to do different things than if I wanted to work in an economics department. I've been the head of economics departments. I'm now a head of a group within the business school. Whatever skills you have, it is possible to use your skills to climb the ladders. But you do need to know um, what qualifications, what attributes, what experience, what publications your next employer is going to be looking for. And part of that is where you publish. Um, I'm going to be talking about where you should be publishing. And I'm also going to be talking about whether or not you can publish in those particular areas. So by putting lots of data together, this is what it appears the academic ecosystem looks like. You are a researcher. You have particular skills which allows you to publish in different areas. It might be the case, as it is with myself, that you write on 2 or 3 different areas. And therefore, some individuals know you for only part of what you're writing. So what you're doing is you're developing different parts of your research. You're developing areas where you want to contribute. You're developing knowledge, but different people will recognize you for different parts of that knowledge. What that also means is that there will be some people who don't know everything that you write. It might be the case that you want to highlight to other people that you're particularly strong in one area. And therefore, when you're with one group of people, you'll be pushing one group of or one cluster of papers that you've been written. You won't be emphasizing another. And that can be a strength and that can be a limitation. All of this is then wrapped within several layers, a little bit like an onion. So you've got the culture within the department which you work in. It can be enabling. It can be really supportive. There can be lots of individuals who are very interested in what you're doing, very interested in what you're writing. They'll want to read your work. They'll want to give you feedback on that. Then you've got the next layer of the onion really is the social networks. That's the conferences. My own experience of the Regional Studies Association conferences, for instance, are that they are incredibly supportive. You are surrounded by lots of individuals who are very much interested in your area. It's a very vibrant, dynamic, interested conference. Not all conferences are like that. You will be making contact with some individuals who have a much closer overlap with your own research. And those are the contacts that you really need to make and keep, nurture, and develop. Then you've got the discipline. There are some disciplines which are more competitive than others. There's some disciplines which are which will challenge you in a way which is not necessarily supportive. And then, of course, you've worked within academia, and academia goes through these cycles, and we're in a challenging cycle in the UK at the moment. So all of these layers of the onion can be very enabling. You can surround yourself with lots of individuals who are really enthusiastic about your research, who want to help you. But it's also the case that these can backfire. It can be the case that you might be working in an institution where people are not interested in your work and not interested in providing you with feedback. They might even be making it difficult for you. So the question I think I have for you as an early or mid-career or even late career researcher is, do you need to be enabled? Do you need to be supported? Do you need to be surrounded by people who are who want the best for you? I think most people do. I think in many cases, people don't realize that another institution could be beneficial for you. I have worked in 6 different institutions. Feel very lucky that I'm at the University of Sheffield at the moment. University of Sheffield has been very, very supportive and enabling for me. It allows me to develop, but I do know individuals in some institutions where this is not the case. Has that then damaged their career? Has it then allowed the resulted in a slower rate of progress? When I talk to individuals, when I've got all of this anecdotal evidence, I do think that in some cases, where people are located is not necessarily doing the best for them. The flip side of this, of course, is that there's some individuals working in some departments which are supporting them fantastically well, and they're really able to achieve even more than they expected, than I expected, than other people expected them to achieve in their career. And what we're really looking for is the latter, I think. So I think one of the most important aspects of enabling you to achieve your potential is to make sure you're working in a place where you get that support. That support is from the internal culture. It's from across conferences. It's connections outside of your university, the social networks. But where you actually work within, the department that you work within has huge impacts. I have been interviewed for a number of jobs. I've been lucky enough to get some of the jobs that I did want, but it's also the case that when I was interviewed for one job, for instance, which I really liked, I had this gut feeling that I needed to check it out again. So I went to that institution. I put a hat on. I put some glasses on. I sat in that department. Um, I felt the atmosphere. And out of that interview, I realized that it wasn't as enabling as I hoped it would be. And therefore, I decided to turn that job offer down. I do think you need to make sure that the match between what you need and what you're offered in that new institution needs to be really, really strong. And I do think it's worth checking those aspects out in more depth. Okay. So where you work is incredibly important. The second aspect, which seems to rise to the top as being what influences your ability to achieve your potential and what allows you to enhance your research, really is what you publish and where you publish. You should, of course, be, in the ideal world, it should be the case that you are publishing articles and other manuscripts, which are of the highest quality that you're able to write. So quality is absolutely important, absolutely vital. You also need to publish in places that value your contribution. Now, one thing which I found difficult to understand, particularly at the early stage of my career, is when I was writing work which I thought was of a good quality, why wasn't it getting published in the journals where I thought it should be appearing? And the reason why it wasn't is because the quality of the work I thought was there, but it wasn't necessarily being valued by the editors and by the referees. And part of that is because the editors and referees have vested interests. Editors, for instance, wish a journal to go in particular directions. They will want particular papers to be prominent and to be highly visible. And therefore, even if you write a fantastic paper, it may be the case that the journal is not going to publish it because it's not in the direction that the editor wishes to take the journal. So this is really important if you're going to write a paper and you're going to submit the paper to the journal and you want it to be accepted and published. Okay. Another important aspect, particularly in management, what I'm seeing at the moment is the rise in the importance of particular methods. Now, it is really important for you to use methods and to write papers which respond to and fulfill what peers are expecting to see, particularly with respect to the interpretation of of results. So, for instance, if you're writing a paper which has got lots of statistics, and it's got lots of p-values, there are some journals who would want you to illustrate an understanding of that, and that needs to be at the front, and the most important issue that you're going to discuss. In other journals, however, they don't want that. They instead would want the substantive contributions. They would not want you to emphasize the p-value or the statistical significance, for instance. So what you need to do is write the paper in a way which fulfills the editors and your referees, and effectively the discipline's expectations of the use of that particular methodology. It is the case, however, and there's quite a number of examples about this, that as you progress through your career, people are able to perhaps move away from those strict expectations, and that you're able to develop literatures in a more challenging way. So let's talk about the need to conform. I think at the start of your career, maybe even middle of the career, you need to conform with expectations, particularly with methods. Different journals will require you to use more of one method than perhaps of another. But it's also the case that if you were to propose a different methodology, which might be stronger than the ones that they're used to reading, particularly given your particularly for the research question that you're trying to answer, those reviewers, those editors might not be aware of that methodology. They might therefore choose to reject your paper because they're not as familiar with those arguments, those methods, perhaps as you are. So in order to make sure your paper gets in the appropriate journal, you need to identify the stance of the reviewers. You need to identify the stance of the editors. You need to identify whether or not there are papers already published in that journal which build on a similar related issue, because that would then conform with what the direction that the editor wishes to take the journal. Do be aware, however, that if you choose not to write a paper on that particular area, then it's likely to not become and not be accepted. Okay. And if you don't publish in some journals, then it might affect your ability to get promotion. It might affect your probability of being recruited if you need transfer. So there's a lot of thinking that everybody needs to do if they're considering what to write, where to send it, and the impact that may have on your future job prospects. I do think finally it's worth emphasizing, however, that there are lots of examples of individuals moving away from particular literatures. So, for instance, we should be aware at the early stage of our career that journals are simply a marketplace. You are supplying a paper to an outlet. They need to make sure that what they're buying is what they want. Are they going to demand the knowledge that you're writing? It is a market. It's worth strongly recognizing that journals are simply a marketplace. There are individuals who do falsify their preferences. There are individuals who write up journal articles in order to conform with expectations and therefore get a paper in a particular journal. I think this is less common in the regional studies literature, but there is a study that was done around about 10 years ago, which emphasized that over 60% of individuals working in a particular discipline, and that shall remain nameless, were actually falsifying their preferences. In other words, they're writing stuff they didn't necessarily believe in order to get papers published. I would strongly encourage us not to do that, because I think knowledge needs to be pushed in a particular direction. You may well be our next generation. We need to make sure that the information that we're discussing is vitally important. One individual who I've got a huge amount of respect for is Samuel Bowles. Now, Samuel Bowles used to write a lot on incentives. He used to write a lot of very strong papers, but then when he retired, he wrote a book published in 2016, which emphasized that good incentives are not as strong as he thought. In fact, what's really important is that we have good citizens, and that those good citizens are the individuals who take the planet forward. So thanks very much for listening. One thing I would like to emphasize before I close is that most of the slides that I've gone through have drawn on quantitative information from surveys, from interviews, and what I hope to do is to move forward with a new research project to try to understand the consequences of the university sector change, particularly in the UK, and how that change is affecting early and mid-career scholars. So if you are interested in participating in that research, please send me an email. And once I get ethics approval to move forward on that, then I will contact you back. Thanks very much for listening. I hope you find that useful.
Thank you so much for that, Don. That was really illuminating, and I know a lot of what you said really resonated with me, and I know that um, from my own personal experience, one of the things that I always tell early career researchers is network, because even if you aren't lucky enough to be in a particularly helpful and supportive work environment, sometimes your network can really help you to make that learning that otherwise isn't happening at home. Okay, now we've got a couple of people with questions. So the first question that we're going to go to is, how can we ensure that institutions that we're interested in working with will enable and support our progression? It really is a leap of faith, actually, isn't it? When you go to work for somewhere. On the one hand, it's great to get a job, but on the other hand, sometimes it's a little bit more complicated. So, how can we ensure the institutions that we're interested in working with will enable and support our progression, beyond speaking with people that already work there, and of course we might not know that? What are your tips for figuring that out in the interview process?
It's a great question. And to be honest, I don't fully know the answer, because I don't think we can be sure through the interviews and through general conversations with people already at that institution, whether or not it definitely will work for you. But I also think that it's worth checking out as much information as possible, because it might be the case you can identify if that institution will not work for you. Okay, so I think there's different aspects here. It's like I said, I have turned down job opportunities in the past because I think those institutions, having gathered further information, would not work for me. But that's not necessarily the same as thinking, well, this is a great institution, it's definitely going to work for me, because things change and things evolve. So I would try to identify those institutions you definitely don't want to work for first, cross those off the list, and then hope for the best for the others.
Cool, thanks for that. And I suppose this is connected to the second question. Um, uh, how do you go about getting that kind of information? Is that entirely relying on other academics that you know? And in which case, how are you building your academic network outside of the university setting?
Yeah, again, great question. When you start off in an academic career, there seems to be lots of universities you can work for. Which one should you work for? Uh, is is um, is a difficult question. The more people you talk to at conferences, the more you understand how they fit into their institution, how much support they receive, and you do get a feeling that one institution is better than another. Okay, so your professional networks will shape your understanding of whether or not one institution is better than another. So I would draw on that information quite strongly. When you go to a conference, you can also identify, um, we've actually got an accounting and finance conference on at the moment in my building, the Sheffield University Management School building. It's very, very busy, but there's also quite a number of academics in. It's because it's a great place to work. It's also a very social place to work. I don't think you get that everywhere. So if those individuals, those delegates at that conference might see this as as a good place to work as well. So I think there are lots of different things you can do to get a feel of the atmosphere at institutions. Part of it is exchange of information with across your professional networks, but part of it is literally going down and feeling the atmosphere for yourself.
Cool, thanks for that, Don. So we've got another question from Lavanya about journals in particular. So we're asking here, well, first of all, this is a really great webinar, thank you. What keeps missing is navigating journal stance. Would you recommend reaching out to the editor-in-chief with the idea of a paper abstract before submitting to the journals directly? Or, how do you go about navigating journal stance? We've also got another question that it would be nice to be able to fit in as well if we have time. So if we could keep it brief.
Yeah, again, it's a good question. It's often quite a difficult question to answer. In my experience, um, if I'm thinking of sending paper to a journal I'm not terribly familiar with, but I think it aligns well, I would be contacting people who I know have published in that journal because they would know the journal better than me. They would know how to make sure the fit of a paper that I want to send is strong to the expectations of the editors. I think that's what I do most of. I also, if you're strengthening your social networks through your conferences, it might be the case that you can create a network where you can share your papers. You can get feedback from your colleagues, and that could. So, for instance, when a paper is shared with me, I would respond by saying, "This is a really good paper. To strengthen it, you need to do A, B, and C, in my opinion, and I think it would be a really good match to that journal D." So that type of advice as well is a good way. Is a good way, I think, to make sure the match is strong.
Cool, thanks for that, Don. So we've got one more question. So we've currently got about 2 minutes. We'll probably overrun by about 2 or 3 minutes if that's okay. So we've got one final question that would be really nice to get in here. And that is for early career researchers, what is a good time to start thinking about publishing? Is it when we're done with the field work or while we're doing the field work, before or after? When do you recommend thinking seriously about starting to develop your publishing?
Another great question. And I think different people have ventured down the publishing track in different ways. The way I did it is that I recognized that I didn't know whether my papers were good enough. And I think people need to recognize that more. So I tend to write something. I tend to talk to people, particularly when I was an early career scholar. I showed my ideas to individuals who I thought were really trusted individuals who aren't going to take my ideas, but actually want me to develop them further. And if they said, well, it's not as strong as it needs to be, you need to do this. And if I didn't feel that I could do that, I said, well, can we do it together? And I actually learned an awful lot from co-authorship from with more experienced scholars who knew so much more than me about publishing and about writing and about shaping the paper ready for submission. So I don't think it's ever too early to write these papers, but I do think it's often too early to submit the papers. And what you need to do is get that advice from highly experienced individuals who can help you shape those papers so that they've got a good chance of acceptance.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for that, John. And I think one of my personal take home from this is about that it really underscores how incredibly valuable learned associations such as the Regional Studies Association are for connecting with people that are doing work in your kind of area and who you can work with, explore with, and ask questions of about broader academia as well. And of course, and also, as somebody who came through the Regional Studies Association network, and I feel like I owe a debt to the RSA. I'd like to mention that the RSA has some great networks, which it will be really good for helping you to make and develop contacts and scholars working in your area. Okay, many thanks everyone for coming and for all of your fantastic questions, and also, of course, to Don for his excellent and thought-provoking talk. And of course, it'd be very interesting to see how your research develops in the future, Don. I think that that also sounds highly relevant to people on this call here. Okay, so and also, of course, a massive thanks to the Regional Studies Association for providing the opportunity for us to have this conversation. Okay, I think this brings our webinar to a close. We hope that you have a lovely rest of your day, and goodbye.